Hello and welcome to The Enthusiasm Project. This is the second episode of this podcast, which is a milestone because it means it wasn't just an idea and a thing that happened one time. It was an idea and a thing that happened repeatedly. So now we're well on our way to making more. But if you didn't hear last week's episode, or you don't remember last week's episode because it was a week ago or whatever, basically I started out by just explaining what this podcast is. So I'd highly recommend, if you've got the time and the interest, to go back and check that out, because it not only explains the point behind this podcast, but also kind of outlines why I started the Enthusiasm Project in the first place, which up until now has been primarily a YouTube channel, and that is really the main outlet for it. But the podcast is a great companion piece to the YouTube channel, because through podcasting it's just a better platform for things that don't necessarily fit onto YouTube. As much as I love YouTube, it is a platform that has, there's just certain time constraints that work best and certain styles that work best, and production takes a certain amount of time. So podcasting is a really, really nice companion to that for certain things that I'd like to take deeper dives into. As of now, at the beginning, this is basically a solo podcast with me sort of explaining some of my thoughts and ideas, but even though it's from me, it's really not about me. It's just sort of my perspective, but the goal is to sort of communicate some things that I'm interested in and that I think are important, in the hopes that you'll be able to relate to them and maybe filter them through your perspective a bit and do something beneficial with the ideas, or add them onto your own ideas, or spark something new, or, I guess just enjoy yourself for an hour every week. And for the at least foreseeable future, my plan is to put a new podcast up every Sunday, so it's sitting there ready for you as you go into the work week, and you can listen to it at your leisure, as they say. I'm still figuring out the workflow for the podcast, but I feel like I have it down to something that's pretty manageable and pretty quick and pretty effective. And now through Anchor, which I did end up using, the podcast is available pretty much everywhere you get podcasts. So obviously, if you're listening to this, you already got it. So it's sort of weird for me to explain to you how to get the podcast. But if you want to tell someone about it, it's on all of the things: Apple, Spotify, Google, other stuff I haven't even heard of before. It's all there. Wherever they go, they're all there. So today I wanted to focus on time, because especially with the first few podcast episodes, as I'm still kind of figuring it out for myself, I think that it's important to sort of establish some perspective, some purpose, and make sure to sort of gain your trust in that if you're going to give me your time to listen to this, to my beautiful voice for an hour every week, that you get something of value in return. I think that's a pretty fair deal, if you ask me. And one of the things that is constantly weighing on my mind is the issue of time. It's actually one of the underlying things that made me want to start the Enthusiasm Project in the first place, like way back in 2010. And on the Enthusiasm Project YouTube channel, this is a shameless self-plug, there is a 2-minute video called Time Management in 2 Minutes. And in that video, it's sort of different from maybe some other time management strategies or tips that you may have come across. It sort of explains a new perspective I've gained in the past few months on managing my own time and my own calendar that has been genuinely revolutionary. I know that sounds sort of cliche and cheesy, but really is not mind altering. That's a terrible way to look at it. It's like perspective altering, I guess, would be a more correct way of saying that, which is, and I'll kind of explain that. So in that video, it's 2 minutes long, because I figured if I'm telling you how to manage your time, I'm not going to waste a lot of your time. We're going to get into it. I'm going to just explain it real quick. It's 2 minutes. It's pretty clear. It's pretty effective. But ironically, I now want to dedicate an entire podcast to that idea so I can delve into it a little bit deeper and maybe help you to understand where I'm coming from, and then maybe look at your own time management and just sort of see how you're utilizing or not utilizing your time. Because The fundamental thing, which I talked about in the last show, is that we're all gonna die. Sorry, I don't have like a button to cue an ominous music cue, but just imagine that there was one there. And what I mean by that is not anything like terrifying or threatening, but just that time is really, really limited. And, none of us knows exactly how much there is, but what there is all that there is. And I think that it's really important that however you choose to spend that time, you should be in charge of that as much as possible and be aware of that as much as possible. So I'm not somebody who criticizes or, speaks out against people playing a bunch of video games for a lot of hours or, watching Netflix or whatever, because everybody's idea of what is valuable for their time is different, and it changes. It's not even permanent for one person. What's valuable, what's a good use of your time in your teens is very different than your 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. How you use your time is a very personal thing, but I think it's something that you should take the time to reflect on. And unfortunately, I don't think enough of us do that, or we don't do that early enough or often enough, and that leads to a lot of problems. So for today, I kind of want to delve into, I want to explain this perspective that I mentioned in the video, which is how I've been looking at my calendar. But in order to do that, I kind of want to help you understand how I came to this realization, because if I just say it just sounds like, yeah, duh. But if you kind of like have the backstory to it, then maybe it'll have that kind of like mind blowing. I don't know if I have I need a sound effect thing, because this is where I play the Inception sound and it'd be like, boing, and then, I don't know, time would slow down. Time is such an illusion because part of it is something that's totally made up by people, and the other part of it is this real force that controls the entire universe. And we're always sort of in the middle of that, in the balance, in the area between what we have just totally made up and implemented upon ourselves versus the unchangeable laws of nature. And because of that, time sometimes feels like there's plenty of it, and we don't really manage that resource properly. So if we look at something that most of us do understand, whether it's in a positive way or a negative way, that would be money. I think money is a great analogy, a great metaphor to use when talking about time, because it's very concrete. All of us have some kind of relationship with money, and I would bet that most of us have a method of deciding what we want to do with our money and how we want to spend our money, and what has enough value to warrant us parting with our money. And I know, some people obviously do this, but it's clearly a bad thing. I think everyone agrees that it is not smart to just run around town on a shopping spree, day after day, just racking up crazy credit card balances and draining bank accounts and paying no attention to any of the numbers or any of the income, and just sort of going nuts with it. That's going to put you in a really bad place. So we all have some kind of money management, and I don't think we do the same thing with our time. So, for example, if you thought of your bank account, so imagine, I guess, you had a bank account where it had a finite amount of money in it, and you could never put more money into that bank account, but you could only withdraw money from that account. And that was the only money you would ever have. So it's one account, can never add to it. You don't know how much is in it, but you can withdraw from it. I would wager that most of us would then be really, really conscious of how we're spending our money. There's certain things you just got to spend your money on, food, clothing, shelter. But when it comes to just sort of random expenses, shopping sprees, splurges, people asking for loans, we'd probably be pretty critical and pretty thoughtful in how we spend our money. And even though most of us don't have a bank account that meets those requirements, even with our regular money, we should have those requirements. What are you going to actually spend it on? You have given your time to earn the money, probably. So what's worth giving that away? Your time, your life is that bank account. You have this account that's filled with time. You really don't know how much is in there. You cannot add to it no matter what. And once it's gone, it's gone. So you can only withdraw from it. And that's really risky. And so I don't think enough of us value time as the resource that it is. We're all really good at looking at money and thinking that money is the most valuable resource and valuable thing in the world. But then we look at our time and we just sort of think that it's worthless in some cases, when in reality, time is infinitely more valuable than money. And it's crucial that you look at it that way, no matter where you're at in life or what you're doing or how important anything else is. Your time is the most important, most valuable resource you have. And you don't have very much of it, and you'll never get any more of it. And you're constantly spending it. That's terrifying. So if you're like me, that kind of gives you a panic attack for a second. But then if you're also like me, you want to solve problems and you want to figure things out. So you start looking at how to utilize your time. And so for me, what happened personally was I use calendars a lot, like, humans do. I prefer paper calendars, which is sort of ironic since so much in my world is digital, but I love a paper calendar. But it doesn't really matter if you use a digital calendar, paper calendar, whatever. It's all basically the same thing. You've got your days and your weeks and your months laid out and you plan stuff. What I was noticing through work especially was that I was really good and I thought I was being really organized by filling up my calendar. So I was so proud, the month would start out and there'd be a few things on the calendar. And as each month would progress, as I got towards the middle and towards the end of the month, the calendar would fill up to the point where, it would almost look comical how full it was. And I was really proud of that because it made me feel productive and it made me look really organized. And it was like this concrete physical example of how I was managing my time so effectively and so efficiently. But it was also causing me a crazy amount of stress and anxiety. And I couldn't understand why. And so I sort of doubled down and started just trying to put every single thing on the calendar. And it only made things worse. And it took years, literally, of trying to figure out what the deal is with this. And so, here's an example. Basically, I would get an email or a phone call for someone and they'd want to schedule a meeting or schedule a phone call or, have an event or something. And I'd look at my calendar, and on the day that they asked if there was anything there, the day would be blank. And I would say, yeah, cool, I'm totally free on that day. So I'll write it in there. There we go. And then I'd come into work that day or the day before, I'd be preparing. And I'd start to get sort of bummed out and depressed and stressed, thinking, oh my gosh, there's not enough time. I don't want to do this. That's going to be a really long day. Why do I keep having these things on my schedule? And I know the answer might seem obvious, but we're constantly just working and in some cases just trying to get to the next day and through the day and meet that day's requirements and move on to the next, that we don't necessarily analyze things fully. And what I realized after a long time of doing this was that I was totally wasting my time and I mean literally wasting my time. We talk about you can spend your money and you can spend your time on things, but we don't think about spending money and spending time in the same way. And if I was just, walking into my job every day and just throwing $100 bills into the trash, it'd be like, hey, you're wasting your money. But I can walk into my job every day and just throw hours into the trash, and then we actually tend to brag about that because we go, oh my gosh, I worked 11 hours today. I worked 12 hours today. I'm so dedicated. When really you're just bragging about throwing your time away in a lot of cases. Not every case, of course, but in a lot of cases. And so the realization that I had, the reason that I was wasting my time was because I was not looking at my calendar accurately. I was not looking at it correctly. I was starting to feel this crazy guilt, and I was raised Catholic, so I feel guilty about everything, including feeling guilty about stuff. So my guilt causes guilt, which leads to more guilt, and it's a whole thing. But I was starting to feel guilty when I was saying no to stuff, because if somebody asked, for a meeting or a phone call or whatever, and I was looking at my calendar on the day they requested it, and I saw that there was time available, I felt obligated to fill that time with their request. They asked something of me. There was nothing else on my calendar. If I said no, clearly I was just being lazy or selfish or greedy or rude. And so I would always say yes, which is totally not the way I should have looked at that at all. The reason being because, at least, on a typical basic calendar, when you look at a day, it's got the little square with the number in it, whatever day of the month it is. Even if that is blank, that still represents an entire work day. So in my case, that's, 9 to 10 hours of work. And, I don't mean to brag. And I feel like if you're listening to a podcast, if you're 16 minutes into a podcast about time management, you're probably not a slacker. You probably like to do a good job. And so when I work, I really work. Like I don't take many breaks. I work really hard. I kind of am proud that I feel like before lunch, I've often accomplished more than what I think a lot of people do in 1 or 2 full days. And, like my employer definitely gets their money worth out of me because I really, really work hard and use my time and try to constantly make progress on things. And, I take working lunches and don't take breaks throughout the day. And that's a lot. That, if there's a blank spot on my calendar, that's what I'm doing. It doesn't mean that I'm doing nothing. So when someone asks, hey, do you have time to meet with us at this day and this time? And I look at my calendar and it's blank. It doesn't mean that I have the time. It just means that I'm only going to be doing my job that I work really hard at anyway. So do I want to add anything on top of that? Which that right there was the mind-bending realization that anytime something was added to my calendar, it wasn't a sign of my organization or my productivity. It was something that was being added on top of my regular full-time job, which at minimum is 40 to 50 hours a week. Like, many people work many, many hours every single week. And so once I realized that, and I was kind of looking, okay, is this opportunity or this obligation or whatever it is this worth adding on top of my regular work time? It's crazy how often the answer is no. In fact, I would say the majority of the time, the answer is no. When someone asks, do you have time for this? Can you do this? No. And it really should be something that is genuinely worthwhile of that time. Because right now I'm just talking about the work day. This is a normal work day. I'm a teacher, so I'm using that schedule, but this would apply to anyone with any kind of regular structured work schedule. But even a business owner or someone who's self-employed should have some kind of structure. Obviously, your number of hours would be a little bit different. But the point is, what I knew, like as a teacher, I have a prep period every day. So I know that there's at least an hour scheduled every day where I don't have students and I can, ideally work on other stuff that I need to work on, because in addition to teaching 190 students, I have, all the paperwork and administrative things and actual on-campus commitments and obligations and department meetings that I have to go to and things like that. So that's kind of what that time is for, but it's also is a time to meet with some of our industry partners, take phone calls, handle student internships, all that sort of stuff. And there's so many times that people will say, hey, can you meet, during your prep period on this time? And I look and there's nothing on the calendar. So I say yes, knowing that that's just going to cause me to get buried under more work, because now I'm not going to have that chunk of the day to make progress on the things that are really important, that I do think are worth my time. And instead, I'm going to be spending my time, at some meeting that probably won't go anywhere, because let's face it, most meetings are pointless. And I say that as someone who has been in multiple meetings that were designed so we could plan more meetings. So they're meetings about meetings. And at that point, the snake has eaten its own tail, and I don't even know what to do. The system is broken. And I think all of us fall into that. And so that was the realization that just, oh my gosh, it changed everything. But it didn't mean I started acting on it right away. It took a long, long time, and I'm still very much in the process of working on this constantly, for me to be okay with saying no to a commitment and really assessing the value of something. And of course, being polite and diplomatic and professional about it, but really at this point, trying to squeeze extra time out of me really is like trying to get blood from a rock. Like, there's nothing there. Like, it's gotta be something that is clearly valuable, clearly beneficial, to me, my students, my program. It's something that I'm interested in, whatever it is. It's a really guarded resource. And through that, a lot more time is opened up, because now my time is mine. I am in control of that resource. I'm not just spending without thinking about it. I am carefully budgeting and allocating my time just like I would with my regular money. And so that I think that everybody should be very defensive of their time and guarding of their time. And, there's the balance is going to be a little different for everybody, and it's going to be different at different phases of your life and different career fields, of course. But you should be conscious and in charge of your time. And if you're not, something is wrong, and that should be looked at and addressed. And it might take some pretty creative problem solving. It might take a drastic change, but your time really is all that you have. And if you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend the podcast called S-Town, it's produced through NPR and a lot of the same team that did Serial and some just like really great broadcasts and podcasts. And S-Town I've listened to it like multiple times. It's such beautiful storytelling. It's only, I think, 8 episodes long. So it's so good. And it's a true story where a reporter just sort of follows up on this person who emails him. And this guy is just he's sort of insane and a maniac, but he's also like completely brilliant. And at one point it outlines that what the subject of S-Town has done is he's added up the number of waking free hours that the average person has in our modern world. And so it's basically how much time you have to do with as you please. And he set for himself the measure of success as being able to be in charge of your own time and use your time as you see fit. And that is something that, since my earliest memories, if I am in charge of my time, I'm happy. And, that might mean that I'm working really, really hard. That might mean that I'm, missing out on another opportunity. But if I have chosen to do that, if that's something that I want to spend that valuable resource on, then I'm happy and satisfied. And sometimes that means doing nothing, and sometimes that means being ultra productive. But either way, it is the importance of being in control of your own time. And where I think this can get really, really tricky is just in our culture. And I speak, of American culture, and this might not be as true, or it might be as true in other parts of the world. I don't know for sure, but I definitely know that in America, there's this crazy irony, because there's this stereotype that a lot of us play into and a lot of jokes are based off of the fat, lazy American. But in reality, the badge of honor that so many of us wear is how much we work. And, it is not at all uncommon to have a conversation with someone that involves how many hours you put in that week. Oh my gosh, I put in 60 hours this week. And someone's like, oh, geez, yeah, I did 60 hours last week. Plus I went in on Saturday and Sunday. And you're like, okay. And it just becomes this like one-upping competition, because however much time you're putting into your job clearly, I guess, equates to your actual value as a person and your actual worth as a member of society. And that is, since I've started looking at my calendar this way, when I have those conversations with people, a lot of time I see it as like people bragging about being extremely wasteful and sort of stupid with their time. And it's just sad. It's not impressive. It's not something you want to compete with. It is just sad, and there's something admirable about, someone who wants to learn a new skill or accomplish something, and they put in their 10,000 hours to gain that expertise, as long as that's what is the valuable thing to be doing with their time. But so many of us, I know just every place I've ever worked, especially any kind of office setting or a school setting, but really anywhere, there are, of course, a variety of employees, and there are some who work really, really hard and really efficiently, but there's also others who clearly, they work an 8-hour shift, but really only work for like 2 hours. And just the other day at our school campus was a day where there were no students, but it was teachers for professional development, which is another great way of saying totally wasting Tom's time. Sorry, it's entirely true. I hope that's not offensive, but it's not a good use of our time, but it's a contractually mandatory part of our time. So got to do what you got to do. But there's still a lot of other staff that are there all day, even though there are no students. And so there's office support staff, for example, like in the registrar's office at the end of the semester. I can't even imagine the amount of work they have to do to compile transcripts and grades and get stuff out to colleges. And they have to be there, way beyond their normal working hours to get their job done. And if they don't get their job done, it can really mess up the plans and the futures of the students that they're there to serve. So there's those really critical jobs. But there are also positions that if the students aren't there, aren't very active. And and the people who work them, on a day when there's no student, they will literally come in, they'll, answer whatever emails, take care of whatever little like busy work, and then they'll literally just sit there for their shift. When it's lunchtime, they'll go to lunch, then they'll come back and they'll just kind of sit. And then that's it. Maybe gossip a little bit, maybe like shop online, but that is it. And I can't, you couldn't pay me enough to do that. That is such an insane waste of everybody's time. And I feel like that sounds harsh, but it was like appalling to see. And I've seen it at every workplace. There's just sort of, a person gets paid for a job, they come in and do that job, but there's really no thought into how the time is being spent. And I think so many people, they're really proud that they went in an hour early and they stayed 3 hours late. But if you look at what they actually accomplished, what's actually going to matter in the next 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, it's really little. It's really very, very little. And if you look at the actual like meaningful work that is accomplished, it's often far less than what is in a regular shift. And of course, I'm just as guilty of that sometimes too, but being aware of that is the key. Being aware of how you're using your time, which is your valuable resource. And I'm personally just exhausted and so tired of the idea that your worth is directly related and correlated to the amount of hours you spend at your workplace. Some of us are scheduled or contracted or whatever to put in a certain number of hours, and you need to meet that because that's the deal that you've made with your employer or your client or whomever. But beyond that, you should really look at how that time is being spent, and do you actually need to spend that time? And I say this as someone, teachers, I could get on the soapbox all day about teachers being viewed as people who work, a couple months a year for a couple hours a day and then have all this time off and yada, yada, yada. And of course, if you are a teacher or a teacher, you know that that is not the case for the vast majority of people who teach. There's so much time beyond just the school day that is put into your time. It's not what the stereotype portrays. However, there are definitely benefits like winter break and spring break and these times when you get that time off, and it's literally in your union contract that you get that time off. So it's not like your boss can come in at the last minute and say like, "Oh, we're changing the schedule and it's required that you show up." No, legally can't happen. You get that time. But if you're somebody who cares about your job or you're interested in what you do, sometimes you go above and beyond. And while there's nothing wrong with doing that when you want to, I know personally, I used to be the person who on winter break, which is 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year's, I would literally be at work every day unpaid, except for Christmas and New Year's. I would go in and try to work on stuff and catch up things, and thinking that it was going to put me ahead, not realizing that the amount of work that you do in most career fields is kind of like a goldfish, and it will grow to fill whatever time you've allotted to it. And so you're never going to get finished. There is no finish line. You're just going to get closer to the next thing that you need to do. And it feels good sometimes to put in all that extra work and to have that badge, and to, people come in the next day and they go, "Oh my gosh, I saw your car in the parking lot on a Saturday," and yada, yada, yada. But that really isn't always the best use of your time. And I know I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but it's just so hard to emphasize enough. I don't think you can overemphasize the importance of that. And so a couple of years ago, what I started doing, maybe like 2 school years ago, was really taking my vacations. When I'm at my job, I give as much as I possibly can. I put everything into it, into being the best teacher I can be, the best employee, colleague, whatever, and growing as a professional and trying to be innovative and doing new things and catching up on stuff and being organized. I give it everything I got. And then when I leave, I completely try to put it out of my head and forget about it and not think about it, which is hard to compartmentalize in that way, but has made me so much happier overall, healthier overall, and a better at my job overall, which is kind of shocking because it really feels like you're slacking it at first when it's winter break and you leave on Friday and you don't set foot in your classroom for another 2 weeks. It's fun, but oh my gosh, it really feels like you're slacking it, especially when you come in and so many people are like, oh, I didn't see you here over the break, or oh, I put in so many extra hours. And you're like, cool, you're a slave. I don't know what to say. You wasted your time, or you can't manage your time effectively, because if you plan ahead for that stuff and you're not wasting your work day with pointless things that are added on top of your calendar, then you can organize and you can go, okay, we're going to be gone for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. So I'm going to plan ahead. And by the time I walk out of here on the last day, everything is going to be in place and ready to go for the first day back. So it's not going to be chaos. It's going to be a very smooth transition, and I can leave and it can all easily, like my mind can rest easy, and then I can enjoy my time off and I can enjoy other parts of my life, because that's really what it is. Even if you love your job, I love my job, but I really look forward to the weekends and to vacations, because those give me time to do other things. I want to spend time with Heather and our dogs, and I want to go have fun, and I want to do nothing. I want to just sit on the couch and watch movies and YouTube videos, and I want to make videos, and I want to play music, and I want to explore new hobbies and go places. And that is the foundation behind the Enthusiasm Project, is that I can't fundamentally understand the concept of being bored, because there's just not enough time to explore and do all of the stuff that there is to do. It's like a buffet that you could never eat or try all the things at. It's just how? So you have to manage your time. And the difference I feel in coming back to work after taking legit time off is insane. You're actually refreshed. You actually have new ideas. And the biggest benefit, which I think a lot of people don't realize, because you leave and I gotta check that one email, I gotta finish that one thing. The stuff that's really important for your job will be there when you get back, whether it's a day, you go home for the day and you come back the next morning, or it's a week or 2 weeks or whatever. The really important things aren't going to go anywhere. They're going to be there. The stuff that's not important, which is a shocking amount of the stuff, will just disappear and just sort of fall off your plate. You know how many times I have gone away from work on, one of our breaks for a few days, and then come back and check my work email, and there's these crisis emails saying like, oh my God, Mr. Buck, we need this, and this has to happen, and oh my gosh, this. But then I didn't see them, so I didn't respond to them. And then a few days later, it's like, oh, we took care of it, never mind. Cool. So I could have answered that email and wasted a whole bunch of time worrying effort, or it turns out that there was nothing to actually worry about, or it wasn't that big of a deal, or it really didn't need my input or my help, and I was able to enjoy myself, and the things that are important stayed, things that aren't fell away. And it's very scary to try doing that at first, but I think it's really important. And that is not slacking. That is being organized and productive and efficient and effective with your time, which is very different than just like bailing as soon as, your shift is over or whatever, and just taking off from your workplace. That's, you put in as much time as you need to put in to do what you need to do, and do it very, very well. And then you do other things, and you use your time, as much of it as you can see fit. One of my personal goals is, and I really was able to solidify this after talking with one of my newfound friends, Kevin Shen, who has a YouTube channel of his own name, Kevin Shen. He is working towards financial independence in a way that I haven't seen anyone else work towards it, which is not to just amass as much money as humanly possible, but to literally figure out what is the finite amount of money I need, where if I had that amount of money, it would generate enough money through interest and whatnot to fund my lifestyle at whatever level I'm comfortable with for the rest of my life. And he phrased it as buying back the next 40 or 50 years of his life. And that really is my goal, is to be able to be 100% in charge of my time. So I just talked about leaving school on our teacher breaks, but this last summer, it was really important to me to totally remodel one of my computer labs. And so that was a week or more of summer that I spent remodeling the computer lab, not because anybody told me to, but because I really wanted to. It was a super fun project. I knew it would be really beneficial. It was going to make my life easier. It was fun. It was how I wanted to spend my time. It's a really hands-on, do-it-yourself kind of thing. And I love waking up and getting to go do that. And having the time, you just put on music and you build something and take stuff apart. It's fun. The summer before last, I spent, oh my gosh, almost the whole summer. I spent like weeks of the summer building a broadcast studio set from scratch, which I made a few videos about. But that was kind of the same thing. I mean, it was a real good deal for the school district because I worked a ton for free, but it was what I wanted to do. It was what I felt was the best use of my time at that time. And that is something that pays off literally every single day because we use it every single day. And it really sets my program and our school apart from other programs and other schools. And so, it doesn't mean that you can't work extra. It just means you're doing it on your own terms because your time is so limited. So it's entirely up to you what your value of time is. And, to kind of take it in a different direction and give it maybe a little more perspective, through a personal story. I'm sitting in my room where I film a lot of my videos, so if you've seen some of my videos, it might look familiar. But right off to my side, there's a drum set, and it's a beautiful drum set that I love playing every day. See, there's one of the cymbals. It's really there. I had wanted to play the drums, and I'd wanted a drum set since I was 10 years old. I don't know why it got into my head, but I just really wanted to learn how to play the drums. But drums are really expensive, and I'm 10. I ain't got no job yet. So my mom made a good deal with me, which is I was always a good student, but when I was 10 and in the fourth grade, that's like my parents got divorced, and I didn't have the best of friends. So my grades weren't bad, but they weren't great. They were kind of like B's and C's when they would pretty much all be A's, and fourth grade's pretty easy. So there's a reason not to get like straight A's. I think we actually had O's. I don't even know if we had A's. But either way, whatever the letter was that told us how good we were, I wasn't getting the best ones that I could and that I should have. And so my mom made a deal with me, which was, it might have been out of like Catholic divorced parent guilt, but she said that if you finish the school year, this is like halfway through the school year maybe, she said if you finish the school year and you get perfect grades, straight A's or straight O's, whatever it was, that she would buy me a drum set, and she'd buy me whatever drum set I wanted. And to use her words specifically, she said she would go to the bank and take out a loan if she needed to, which is crazy. We did not have a ton of money, so that was, there wasn't drum set money just hanging around the house. Like that was a big commitment. Even a pretty cheap drum set can be pretty pricey, and if you go, as a 10-year-old, I probably wouldn't have known what a good drum set was, so she probably could have got away with a pretty cheap deal. But if you played any instruments or drums, you know that when you get into the nice stuff, it gets real expensive real quick. So she could have, in theory, been on the hook for like thousands of dollars. And of course, I was 10. It's not like I would have demanded that my parents pay thousands of dollars for something. But it was a sweet deal. I'd been dying for this drum set. Here was an opportunity to get it. Fantastic. It was easy. I just had to do my freaking spelling words or whatever. And everything was going great. I was on track to get my sweet drum set. And then, kind of close to the end of the school year, we took a trip to Target where I found a Lego space shuttle set, which I thought was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And It cost $50, which seemed insanely expensive. I did not have $50 in the fourth grade. And my mom made a very smart move. She played her cards really well because, of course, I asked her, like, can I please have this? And of course, she was like, no, it's $50. You're 10. You don't need this. It's not your birthday. It's not Christmas. Like, no. But you can decide, she said, that I could wait, see if I get good grades, and get the drum set of my dreams, or I could get the Lego set that day, like right then. So get something that costs $50 right now, or wait a month or two, get something bigger that costs who knows how much more. And of course, from her angle as a parent, it's great. No 10-year-old has that kind of delayed gratification built into them. I took the Lego set that day. It's $50. It was awesome. It was really fun. I made a bunch of stop motion movies with it. But the end of the year did come, and there definitely was no drum set because that was part of the deal. So anyway, it was a great way for her to get out of that deal for $50. But it also meant that then I didn't get a drum set. And I really still wanted one. And as time went on, like we ended up, we lived in apartments, and there was no way to get a drum set. There was no money or space or anything. So anyway, by the time I finally bought my own house, right before my 30th birthday, one of the first things I almost literally had the cost of it built into like the cost of the house. It just seems like it's part of the house. As I was like, house equals drum set has to go in the house, because at that point it had been 20 years. I was about to turn 30 years old, and I still wanted to play the drums, and I hadn't gotten my drum set, and I finally had the space to have a drum set. I had, money to buy a decent drum set, not the most expensive one in the world, but a very decent one that was going to be fun to play and fun to learn on and last a long time. And it was still, it's expensive because you buy the drums, and then you got to buy the cymbals, and then you got to buy all the stands and the hardware, and even just a stupid stool can cost like $90. So it gets really expensive real fast. But what was in my brain was, oh my gosh, I have spent the last 20 years wanting a drum set. Could you imagine how good I would be at the drums if I had spent 20 years practicing and playing the drums? I'd be an amazing drummer. Maybe I'd be in like a band or something like that. And it clearly, like, the desire wasn't going to go away. And so in my mind, I was like, I could wait a few more years. Like, we could settle into the house or whatever, and I could, wait until whatever the perfect time is to buy a drum set, which I don't think there is one. And so maybe that would be my 40th birthday. But then what I looked at was, if I buy it now, by the time I'm 40, I will have 10 years of drumming experience behind me instead of having to start from scratch when I'm 40. And then to kind of take that to the next level, I was thinking like, well, if I die, like if I'm in a car accident or if something goes wrong and I die, I'll never have learned to play the drums. Like, that's it. I'm not going to get another chance. Like, I really wanted to. I really, like, the few times I had like practiced on other people's drum sets, like it's a fun feeling instrument to play. And the thought literally of, well, if I die, or even not that much, what if I just get injured or something happens and I'm not able to do that anymore? That's it. Like, there's no other chance. And so in my mind, I was like, right now I'm able to do this. I need to do this. And so I bought a drum set, which, it's been 4 years now, almost 4 years. And I've played that drum set almost every single day. I've gotten pretty decent at the drums. I don't regret it for a second, even though it takes up like half the room that it's sitting in, and it can be super inconvenient at times. It is one of the best things that I've ever spent money on, and more importantly, that I've ever spent time on learning, because now I'm 4 years into playing the drums. I'm way better at the drums than I was the day that I unboxed them and set them up for the first time. And if I hadn't done that, I would still be just waiting to begin. And, I'm not saying that you need to go out and buy a drum set or even any kind of physical thing to get started, but the thing that pushed me over the edge on doing this thing, trying to play the drums, something I'd wanted to do for 20 years, was the very real thought that if I don't do it, then I'll never do it. And meaning that you don't get to the end of your life and then go, oh God, I really wanted to play the drums. Can I go back and play the drums a little bit? That's it. You're done. You're dead. That's it. Someone else can play the drums who decided to, or whatever it is, whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do. There is no second chance. There is no do-over. This isn't the practice run through or the dress rehearsal. This is it. And, every day, there's opportunity costs built into everything. Every time you decide to do one thing, you're giving up, a potential opportunity to do another thing. But at the same time, you're also opening up more opportunities. And the more that you can be practical and pragmatic and strategic with that, the more you can be in line with whatever it is that you feel and find most valuable. And so I know we started the podcast talking about playing or talking about a desk calendar, and now I'm telling you about the drums, but it all circles back to the idea of time and how time is your most valuable resource, your absolute most valuable resource. And I truly don't think that enough people value it, give it the value that it deserves. And I think that especially in our culture, I've grown up in the United States. American culture is the culture I understand the most. And I know that this does exist in other parts of the world, but I also know, when you go to Europe and you can't go into a store at 2 p.m. because they shut it down for a siesta, that is not what happens in the United States. And I'm not saying that needs to, but I'm saying that there are examples of other places in the world where they understand that the quality of life and the individual's value is not necessarily directly tied to how many hours they spend at a place. And, when you look at your workplace, wherever it is, or wherever you spend most of your time, maybe it's your house, maybe it is a workplace, it's kind of crazy because I've worked in some pretty crappy places. And, even if it's a great job, when you sort of stand back and you go I've spent years of my life in this little tiny box over there that I spent years of my life as a sign artist for Trader Joe's, which was one of my favorite jobs and hugely beneficial. But sometimes I'll still drive by that store and I'll look at the part of the building where the sign office is, just the art room is. I'm like, man, I spent years of my life just wedged in between an industrial kitchen and a fabric store and this little tiny, 6 foot by 7 foot box, years of my time spent in there. And luckily I gained so many valuable art skills that it's more than worth it. And that was a great way to spend my time. But wow, it's really hard to make sure that whatever you're spending your time on, you can feel that way about it. And I think that the best way to do that is to make sure that you're spending your time the way that you want to, that you're in charge of your time, that just like they said in S-Town, the measure of a life well lived is the ability to use one's time as one sees fit. And that's going to be different for everybody, which is why there is no one size fits all answer. But it's something that I would encourage everybody to take the time and really evaluate. And, there's tons of time management tips and tricks and techniques online and in the world. And some of them are truly terrific and will change your life. But a lot of them just sort of tell you how to take all these pieces and put them together, these puzzle pieces, put them together. And now you have the picture of your time and your success or whatever. But very few of those methods and of those strategies actually even ask the question of should you even be putting this puzzle together? You're putting together a 1,000-piece puzzle. Why not a 500-piece puzzle? To really sort of evaluate where your time is going. It's pretty crazy. One of the strategies that we do with high school students I haven't done it in a while, but it's always effective, is to have them log their days. And there's really nothing else behind the assignment. You just sort of give them a journal sheet for a week, and it just has the days, the hours of the days, and they just mark what they did. They don't need to do anything. They're just keeping track. Okay, I woke up at this time, spent this much time getting ready, went to school for these hours, whatever, went to a practice here, played video games here, hung out with friends here, went out to eat, did chores, worked at a job, like whatever they do. They just sort of go through, and at the end of the week, start adding up what they did. And it's genuinely a light bulb moment for someone who's 14 or 15 years old to see how many hours a week they spent sleeping. Maybe it's not nearly enough. Maybe it's way too many, or watching TV or playing games or working or spending time with their family or not spending time with their family. And you don't even need to give much of a follow-up to that other than make sure they add up the hours, because that right there will help them to start assessing their time and their goals and their values. And I think adults, if you don't know where to begin, I think that's a hugely beneficial strategy. That's probably something that all of us should do, like at least once a year, is just track your time for a week and see how you spend it. I mean, you would do the same thing with your money, and then really kind of look back and go, oh my gosh, sleep, for example, it feels like wasted time. It can feel like wasted time because you're literally just going into like a vegetative state for hours on end. But so many of us don't get nearly enough sleep, and the improvement to your quality of life and your productivity, if you get enough sleep, is massive. So maybe if you add another half hour to your sleep schedule, that could change everything. I tried that a few months ago. I am still the first one to work every day, but I do that because I know that I'm useless after the school day is over. And so I can't function very well once the school day is over. I'm just done and drained. And so I do go in early to help prepare stuff and get things ready, which is time that I think is valuable. So it's beyond the time I'm supposed to be there. I'm always the first car in the parking lot. But I started realizing maybe it's a little too early. So for example, our school day starts at 7:30. Teachers are supposed to be there at, 7:15, 7 o'clock ideally. I was getting there 6 o'clock, 5:45. So, that's a lot of time before school starts. And I was waking up at 5 o'clock or so, or maybe a little earlier, 4:45 in the morning. And I kind of realized, wow, I don't need to be there that early. I can easily get by and do the things that I need to do in a non-stressful pace, like at a comfortable rate, if I get to work by 6:30 in the morning. If an hour before students walk in the door, that's plenty of time to, because I'm good at prepping stuff the day before. So then I come into work, take care of what I need to take care of in the morning. I don't have to rush or freak out. I can, also then stuff happens overnight, or you get emails and certain things get added onto your plate at the last second. I can really be productive in that hour. But coming in at 6:30 is very different than coming in at 6. And so by the end of a 5-day week, I have now worked, 2.5 hours less, which is not even, it's time I wasn't getting paid for anyway. And at the end of it's 2.5 hours a week, which is 10 hours a month, right? 10 hours a month, just by cutting off that half hour, 10 extra hours of, if you told me like, hey, work 10 hours tomorrow for free, I would say, no, that's insane. But that's what I was doing for years anyway. And sometimes it was a lot more than that. It would add up to, 20 hours a month of free work time. And then to add that on, that half hour that I'm not spending at work, now I'm spending asleep. So it's 10 extra hours of sleep every month. 2.5 extra hours of sleep every week. And, sleep on an early weekday morning is a very valuable thing. So it's really, it's mind-blowing, all the different ways that you can use your time. And that's going to change, and I keep using teaching as an example, but that is a major thing on how I budget my personal time. And I know that like at the start of a school year, I'm going to be going into work earlier. I'm probably am going to be staying a little bit later, but as the school year progresses and we're a few weeks in, then I know I don't have to do that as much. Just the same way when I was in college, I would work 2 or 3 jobs and go to a full class schedule. And, you know, my day off was when I just only had to go to work or school and not both. But the idea of having a day where you don't have to do anything, and it didn't happen for like years on end, literally. But that's not how my life is now. And I wouldn't want that to be how my life is now. When I was in college, I had very clear goals and very clear purpose and drive and motivation to spend that insane amount of effort and time and lose that amount of free time to achieve that goal. But I knew that it's because after that, I wanted to reach a point where I had a career I loved and I had the time and the resources to pursue things that I'm interested in outside of that, which is, I love being able to leave work, spend time at home with the people and dogs that I love, and then, go make a YouTube video or, play the drums or a guitar or go on a nice walk with Heather or whatever the time is, however I want to use the time as I see fit. And that is absolutely ideal. So I'll kind of leave this podcast with the idea. I hope my hope after listening to this is that it wasn't repetitive, but it was, sort of sparking the idea of many of us don't value our time, but all of us could and should be in control of our time. And when you really start asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I spending my time on these things? The answers you start getting are pretty mind-blowing and altering, paradigm shifting, to use like a buzzword. And so I'll kind of leave it with this example here, which is there's sort of a diagram thing that pops up. It's all over like the internet. It's not an uncommon thing, but it basically says, the things that everybody wants are time, energy, and money. And you can only choose 2. When you're young, you have time and energy, but no money. When you're, grown and an adult, you have energy and money, but no time. And when you're older, you have time and money, but no energy. And sadly, for the majority of us, that is not only true, but sometimes like a best case scenario. Sometimes you end up with, no money or no energy or whatever. But by being conscientious and being aware and trying to be pragmatic and making good decisions, I think it's the closest you can get to kind of bridging all 3 of those, to being able to have your time, your money, and your energy, and then spending those resources as you see fit, because they're all very valuable resources, with time being the absolutely priceless one that you just can't get back. So those are my thoughts for this week. Feel free to let me know what you think. My social media handle on Instagram and Twitter is just @SoDarnTom. And of course, there's the Enthusiasm Project YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube, type in the Enthusiasm Project, you'll see my dumb face pop up. You can click on it. And then there's all kinds of good stuff that I have a lot of fun making there. There's also enthusiasmproject.com, which has a very easy contact link and some info. And I'm trying to start rebuilding and adding more interesting stuff to that website as well. So I'm excited to see where things go and progress into the future. Ideally, I would love to be able to do 2 podcasts a week. And as I mentioned last week, it doesn't necessarily always have to be a solo podcast with me. I would love to talk and bring in some more insight and some more voices and get some new ideas and, go in different directions and maybe workshop some ideas that I'm working on. And, the subject matter may change from week to week, but the underlying theme, which is the underlying theme for the entire Enthusiasm Project, is to literally project enthusiasm, because there's so many things to be enthusiastic about. And there's so much interesting stuff in the world and so much to explore and so much to see and so much to do. And there's so little time in which to do it all. So hopefully we can all sort of work together, manage our time, and then maybe even share those stories of how we're deciding to spend and use that time in ways that we see valuable. So thank you so much for spending your valuable time listening to the sounds of my beautiful voice. Couldn't even get through that with a straight face. So that's it. I've been Tom. You've been great. And I will see you, talk at you next time. Thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of your day.